And we're live here from Marquette, Michigan. It's the Revved Up podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I think I'm speaking for both me and Ryan when I say I think we're still grieving from a Boston Celtics loss. Why is Jason Tatum so good?
I mean, he's just good.
Yeah, he really is.
I mean, he does show off his game and the skills more of like a Kobe style play, but that's who he looked up to. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And the Boston Celtics overall, just their roster just is like perfectly curated, it seems.
Yeah. Danny Ainge knew going in what he needed to build there. Now he's not there anymore, but he still built that team to where they are right now. And it's all core key guys that know how to play.
Yep. And the Pistons just seem to get outclassed, but I guess we should talk about a little bit what our goal is as a Revved Up podcast. It's going to be more debate based, so it's going to be more like me and Ryan just kind of bringing statistics, bringing our thoughts, and kind of debating, going back and forth, see if they align. So today we have two talking points, but the first one we're going to hit on is Dwane Casey the long-term head coach for the Detroit Pistons? And when I originally thought of, okay, how do I want to break this down? How do I want to go about proving my thoughts for Dwane Casey? My first thing I wanted to show was Dwane Casey's first 4 seasons with the Toronto Raptors compared to his first 4 seasons with the Detroit Pistons. And so right off the bat, Casey started his career with the Raptors in 2011, and it wasn't a great first season. They went 24-43. In 2012, they went 34 through 48. And then in 2013, it started to look a little bit better. You can kind of see them get a little bit better into year 3. They went 48 and 34, and then they were in the playoffs, were cut in the first round. Yep. And then 2014, they went 49 and 33. So just a little bit better than the previous season. And the thing with the Raptors is, in that young team, you know, you have guys like Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan that Casey kind of brought up.
Yeah, and you look at the other players he had during that time. You have James Johnson, Rudy Gay, Jonas Valanciunas, all these key good mid-level role players that, I mean, look at Jonas Valanciunas as an example. Look at how he's done in Memphis.
Dude, a beast.
He's just a key role guy that helps Ja in certain situations that Ja has to lean on him a lot to do.
Absolutely. And then we see in Casey's first 4 seasons with the Detroit Pistons, he actually started kind of hot. In 2018, he went 41 and 41, and we made the playoffs. We were eventually just swept by the Cavaliers. But I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'll take 500 on the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think that really was the last time, you know, you were talking about role players that the Raptors had. I think that really was the last time the Pistons had role players that knew their role, knew what they were expected, where since then it's kind of been a free-for-all. It's who's playing best right now, because that's who's going to start. And we haven't really been able to get a roster full of guys that you just know what they're going to do every time they hit the floor.
Yeah, and like the role guys that they had during that time, you got, I mean, Andre Drummond is not a role player. He's a key guy. But you have like Reggie Jackson, Luke Kennard, Christian Wood even. Like all these guys that they have a certain role within the team, but did they fill it up to what they were supposed to do? And I mean, the answer is no. They didn't do what they were intended to do.
Yeah. And I think why Casey has kind of become an unpopular coach in Detroit is because of what happens the next year in 2019. They go 20 and 46. And then they kind of match it in 2020 and they go 20-52.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2021, they win 3 more games than the 2 previous seasons, and they go 23-59. Something to note is, and the reason why I can kind of see Casey staying long term is because Casey and Weaver get along.
Yeah.
I can see Casey being long term just because I do believe Weaver and Casey are in close contact on a day-to-day basis. Weaver is more hands-on and he's at practices, he's around the facility. So that naturally makes Dwane and Weaver more connected at the hip and a better relationship because of that communication regularly.
Yeah, and you go back to his time in Oklahoma City, he was under the Sam Presti tree, which Sam Presti, one of the best GMs of all time, in my opinion. And you look just in the sense of the coaches that Presti had while Weaver was there. You have Scott Brooks and Billy Donovan, I'd say two of the best coaches in recent years.
Yeah.
Like their overall records speak for themselves. They finished with winning records in like 5 to 7 years for both. And like, that's pretty darn good.
Yep, absolutely. And another reason I can see Casey being long-term and why I don't think he'll be fired anytime soon is probably because, you know, when you have a young team, you're building relationships from the ground up, especially when guys are new to the franchise. And I think guys like Cade and Sadiq and Isaiah and Ivy, I think they really do look to Casey in a lot of cases. You know, when people are shooting free throws, you see Casey communicating with a lot of those core guys. And I do think Casey makes basketball fun for those guys because those guys are sponges and Casey does have a lot to teach. So I think he is a good coach for them. I just don't think he's a winning coach.
Yeah. I'm going to have to disagree with you on that.
Really? Okay.
I mean, okay. His record overall with the Pistons, 107 and 206. Not good. That's not a winning coach.
No.
But you look at what he's done in Toronto in such a short period of time. I mean, it wasn't very short, but it was still a short period of time.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, his last season there, they went 59 and 23. That's a good record.
Yeah.
That's a playoff team.
That's a great team.
In the playoffs, they played 10 games. That's a lot of games in the playoffs. They went 4 for 6. So, I mean, they lost at the end. But, I mean, I'd rather have 4 wins than get swept 0 for 4.
Yeah, the way we did in 2018.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, too, it's like when you're Weaver, you know, how much time do you give Casey? Like, what does that timeline look like? When do you call it quits?
I think he at least has a minimum of 5 years.
Really?
Right now, he's been in Detroit for 5 years, but he's only been under Weaver for 3. And the reason why I bring up the 5 years minimum is because you look back at Sam Presti in Oklahoma City, Scott Brooks and Billy Donovan both were in Oklahoma City for a minimum of 5 years. So based off of what Weaver knows, off of learning from Presti, who is one of the best, that leads me to think that he's going to give Casey a chance to do something.
And how long was Chuck Daly, like in the Bad Boys era? How long was he with the Pistons?
He was with the Pistons for 9 years.
Yeah.
A long time.
Yeah. So, I mean, so it does take a while to build a franchise coach like that. The only reason I say he's not a winning coach is because we have enough raw talent to beat a team like the Celtics. And it just seems like the team got starstruck by Tatum and they just weren't prepared for him. And Casey, he just doesn't seem to be a great strategy coach. And I feel like the Celtics are a team that you prepare for a week and a half out and you have a game plan for a guy like Jason Tatum, who I believe is a top 5 player in today's NBA.
I mean, I think he is top 5 for sure. But look at his build. He's literally a guard and a big man combined all in one. He has all the intangibles to be like a LeBron James. Now, is he LeBron? No, that's jumping out a little bit.
But that's the thing, though, is that when you have a team with raw talent, you know that they can win games offensively because they've proven with adding a guy like Bojan that their cold streaks aren't so cold, that they can beat teams like the Celtics now. But they just seem to be shell-shocked by guys like Tatum. And whenever you listen to, Casey's interviews before or after games, it's always like, oh yeah, we got to pay a lot of attention to Kevin Durant. We have to pay a lot of attention to Jason Tatum. But you don't see that translating on the court like I wish we could.
Yeah. And I mean, but again, at the end of the day, this team is young.
Yep.
Like, their oldest player is Bojan, and he's 33. So this team is young, so they don't know how to handle certain situations that more experienced teams would have had. And that goes back to Casey in Toronto. When the players he had during that time were all experienced. I mean, in his later stages of Toronto, he has OG Anunoby, Fran VanVleet, Spicy P, Pascal Siakam, of course. And like guys like Norman Powell too. So it's like he had young guys that he had to develop, but he also had all those older guys like Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan there too. But in Detroit, he hasn't had a lot of veterans.
Yeah.
He's had all inexperienced young rookies. And I think that shows because is it more of Casey that needs to go all in on developing these guys? Or is it Weaver who needs to give Casey a better roster?
Well, and here's the thing too, is not every coach can coach as late as like a Greg Popovich. What we simply might be seeing in, maybe Casey's he's getting older. He's getting near retirement age.
Yeah.
So something we might be seeing is just an older Casey that just can't give the Pistons what he gave Toronto in 2011 and 2012. I'm not sure if other Pistons fans notice this, but when it comes to strategy and what Dwane Casey brings to the table as far as game plan, is something that annoys the crap out of me is that a lot offensively, we'll have like 3 screens atop the key where Cade and Ivy are just kind of expected to find themselves open. But when it just doesn't work, and then all of a sudden the shot clock is down to 5 and Cade or Ivy's just hoisting up a silly fadeaway 3. And it's just like, and it seems ever since Casey became head coach, that's been instituted in our offense since 2018. And it's just so frustrating because guys like Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duran is a pick and roll guy, but Isaiah Stewart isn't a pick and roll guy. That's not his bread and butter.
Yeah. But you go off of the pick and roll and you look at past guys Casey has coached. There have been 3 that have popped up with the Pistons and they have played significant roles. You have Jose Calderon, Corey Joseph, and DeLon Wright.
Yeah.
We all know Corey Joseph is still with the Pistons right now.
Yep.
And what does he use and what is he good at?
Yeah.
The pick and roll.
Absolutely.
So it just shows you once these guys learn more and get developed into the offense and know the play style, there is success there because Corey Joseph shows in and night out that pick and roll works, but it doesn't necessarily work all the time with Cade and Ivy because they're not as used to it.
Yeah, because that's something to be noted is that those are 3 solid NBA players, but they're not superstars.
No.
Those are mediocre players. So I'm not sure if that's the answer for guys like Cade and Ivy. I just don't know if that's the right recipe that, because all I see is when Cade's shooting up threes like that at the end of shot clock, his stats are just going down. It's just not a good look on Cade specifically.
Yeah, and you go back to Toronto again. Casey never had a superstar. I mean, no disrespect to DeMar or Kyle Lowry, because in my eyes, they're superstars.
Yeah.
But he never had a superstar. And you look at that roster, what did it take for Toronto to win a championship? A superstar, Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah.
And Casey never had that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if Casey would have had Kawhi, they would have won the championship.
Probably.
But you look at Detroit, Casey doesn't have superstars.
Not yet.
Not yet. Cade and Ivy, future superstars.
I believe so.
Stewart, a good caliber all-star. Not a superstar, but a good caliber all-star. Sadiq Bey, good caliber all-star.
Mhm.
Not a superstar, unfortunately. I think he could have been there, but his stats and progression is just, it's on the decrease this year.
He's very DeMar DeRozan-esque.
Yes,
I
he is,
honestly
actually.
think he is very similar to DeMar.
Yeah. And honestly, Cade is very similar to Kyle Lowry in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And it fits that mold of Cade is Kyle Lowry, Bey is DeMar DeRozan, but who's Kawhi?
Yeah.
And I mean,
hope it's Ivy, right?
I hope it's Ivy.
Yeah.
But position-wise, I mean, they don't line up, of course, but I hope it is Ivy. I think Ivy is the superstar out of those three.
Yeah. One thing I kind of hinted at it before, but another thing that just kind of irks me a little bit about Casey, and I'm starting to kind of realize that this podcast has just kind of like been a venting about Dwane Casey podcast. So, just bear with us. Hopefully we're also speaking for the Pistons community, but something about Casey is I just don't like his pregame, postgame interviews. I just think he's a BSer. I just think he does whatever the most cookie cutter answer and then just moves on without any substance. But I know we just traveled to Detroit this weekend, so we had like 14 hours to just talk and talk about the front office and stuff like that of the Detroit Pistons. And we both came to the conclusion, I don't know if most Pistons fans watch Pistons basketball off Bally Sports, but every 3 to 4 games, they'll have Rick Scalaney on during halftime. And we both like our eyes locked and we're like, yes, he's the guy, because he'll come in on halftime and just like give the complete game plan. Like, we're going to a 3-2 defense. We're going to lock this guy up. We just need to hit, 7 more threes like this and blah, blah, blah. And you'll leave his interview and be like, yeah, let's go. We're about to make a comeback. Let's do it. And he's just so well spoken. So I don't know what your thoughts are on him becoming head coach, but I mean, I could see him possibly taking over for Dwane Casey, because he is one of the only guys in the front office that has been with Cade Cunningham since the beginning, with Killian, with Sadiq. I don't think it's a bad option. Why not have Mr. Clean?
Yeah, honestly, you go back to Toronto again. What happens after Casey's fired? They promote Nick Nurse, who is a part of Casey's staff. So maybe Casey is not the bread and butter and knows exactly what to do to develop guys. Yeah. But maybe he knows how to develop coaches, because Nick Nurse has success.
Develops coaches. Yeah. That's awesome.
I mean, look at Pop. He also develops coaches, but
Becky Hamlin.
Yeah. But you look at recently, his players, they've been mid. They're not all-stars.
Not Manu Ginobili.
No. Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, Kawhi Leonard, who we have brought up in this. But he knows how to develop coaches. And I think Casey also knows how to develop coaches if you look at Nick Nurse. But does he know how to develop players is the real question.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of we kind of gave our thoughts on Dwane Casey. So if you have any more thoughts, leave it in the comments below on if you see Dwane Casey staying around long term. We're going to move on to our second topic for today's video. We're going to talk about Isaiah Stewart compared to Mr. Big Ben Wallace.
Yeah, so if you look at the first 3 years for Ben Wallace, he is I don't want to say it, but he's a nobody.
Yeah.
His stats are awful.
Yeah.
I mean, he averaged in his first year 1 point, 2 rebounds, and that's about it. He shot 34% for his field goal percentage, and that's not good.
Yeah.
I mean, he did increase his field goal percentage the next 2 years. He did score more points. He did get more boards, but he was still a nobody. And then you look at his first 3 years in Detroit, he's a somebody. He's averaging 13 plus boards a game. He's shooting 53%. He's averaging at least 8 points a game. And that's an all-star caliber player.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if you compare their, Isaiah Stewart's and Ben's first rookie season, they are pretty drastically different.
Yep.
I think, we've talked about how Isaiah Stewart was on all rookie second team, I believe, something like that. You know, so Isaiah's first season, he pretty much averaged 8 points, 0.6 steals, 1.3 blocks, 1 assist, and 7 rebounds. And something we have to note about Ben Wallace's rookie season with the Wizards, he had a better roster actually with the Wizards. You know, he had Chris Webber, Juan Howard, and they actually made the playoffs his first 2 seasons. So, you know, technically he's playing with better quality players than Isaiah Stewart did his rookie season. Yep. Yes, the NBAs are very drastically different. They're, you know, the way the league plays. But Isaiah Stewart, I mean, that's not a terrible rookie outing compared to a Hall of Famer like Ben Wallace.
Yeah, and you look at Stewart's first 3 years in the league, 8 points, 7 boards his first year. Then he improves to, 8.5 points, so 9 points a game. He's averaging like 9 rebounds a game. That's a big increase. But you look at his shooting, he shot better his rookie year than he did in his second year. And that just shows you what they're utilizing him in. It's mainly the pick and roll, because there's no way year 2 that they were going to have him pull up from 3. But now, now this season, he's shooting more threes than he's ever shot in his career before.
And that's what I was just going to bring up. You know, I also don't love the comparison because, yes, they are built similar and have the same type of energy. Stu can shoot and has proven that, especially this season. More and more this season, we are seeing opposing bigs starting to close out at the top of the key, and we are seeing opposing bigs, you know, he's spreading the floor better, and you can see the ball movement when Stu is atop the key. The ball movement is just better, especially with Bojan on the court. He just adds a lot more to the game than I think Ben did. Ben, you know, on the defensive end, you always had to know where Ben was. But Stewart also kind of has that. Like, everyone's kind of always surveying for Stu because the dude may only be 6'9", but the dude's arms, I don't know if you see him
he's long.
Walk out of the tunnel, but his arms are freakishly long. So the only way I can see that comparison having actual legs to it is if you actually look at their height. They're both 6'9". If you had them stand next to each other while they're both 22 years old, they're both jacked out of their minds, physically gifted. But if you actually look at their games and their statistics, they're just very different players.
And honestly, I kind of hate to say it, but Stu is a 3-and-D. He is literally a 3-and-D.
He's heading that way.
Ben Wallace is just a defensive anchor.
Yeah.
But Stu is a 3-and-D. He's developing into a 3-and-D, and that's going to show in the future, because in late stretches this season so far, he's had to hit the big shot, and he's hit it majority of the time. And I mean, if you can rely on Stu to hit threes, you're going to have to guard him in a different way.
Yeah.
And that opens up the paint for Duren or Stu to even cut, and then you're in trouble.
Chef's kiss, as I would say. Well, I think we've solved the world's problems today, or at least the Detroit Pistons problems. I think we're going to wrap up today's episode. Thank you for listening, viewing, and please subscribe. Episode number 1 under our belt there, Ryan. What do you think?
Big time.
Big time. I like it. Well, this is Hudson Huff and
Ryan Young.
Checking out.
Peace.